Widespread anti-hijab protests have gripped Iran since the middle of September. In recent days, the protests have taken a bloody turn. Multiple incidents have been reported from different Iranian cities where protesters were shot dead by security forces. As a result, the protests have only intensified. Iranian protesters reportedly hurled petrol bombs at the birthplace of the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. Social media videos appear to show the property under attack by protesters. Several small blasts, thought to be petrol bombs, were captured on film. The property, which is now turned into a museum, is the former home of Iran's supreme leader. WION cannot independently verify the authenticity of the footage. Meanwhile, Iran's state media has reported 9 people were shot dead during these protests by assailants on motorbikes. In 2 separate attacks in southern Iran, a woman and 2 children were amongst those killed. Iran's state media have called these terror attacks. Notably, the attacks on protesters come days after Iran's Revolutionary Guards and the besieged militia issued ultimatums to the protesters, asking them to bring the protest to an end. In a warning issued last month, it was said so far the authorities have shown restraint, but things will get out of hand if the unrest continues. The guards and their affiliated forces have been used to crush dissent in the past. Separately, 4 people have been sentenced to death on charges of enmity towards God in connection with the recent anti-government protests in Iran. Human rights activists have condemned the death sentences, which brought a total of 5 since Sunday, saying they were the outcome of unfair trials. For more on this story, we're now joined by David Patrikarakos, a writer, journalist who joins us from Dubai. David, thanks so much for speaking to WION. Now, despite the brutal crackdowns by the authorities, so many people losing their lives, the protests have only intensified. How do you see this panning out in the days ahead?
So, I mean, look, you're absolutely correct. The regime has been characteristically brutal. It has killed, it has tortured, it has imprisoned, but still the protesters go out onto the streets. How it will turn out is still hard to say. The state still has the monopoly on violence. The protesters are still without a leader. But make no mistake, this is incredibly serious. These protests are not stopping. And don't forget that there were protests many, many times before COVID. COVID saved the regime. This is ongoing now for several years. The regime is in more trouble than it has been since its inception in 1979.
Clearly, the biggest threat to the regime, David, perhaps since 1979. How seriously is this being viewed by the regime, by the supreme leader? Also tell our viewers a little bit about the role of the besieged forces that have been actively involved in cracking down on these protests.
Well, I think it's been taken very seriously by the regime, because how could it not? The threat is severe, and it comes at a time when the country is under extreme financial pressure, when it is internationally isolated, even more so than usual, and when it is in dire financial straits, and it has a serious drought issue. This is a conflict, a combination of factors that are putting huge pressure on the regime. And there are rumors around, obviously, the Supreme Leader Khamenei's health. There have been for a while. So they're in big trouble, and they know it. And as a result, they are using the Basij, very, very sort of liberally. The Basij is this paramilitary force that was founded soon after the revolution to protect the revolution. It's as I say, it's this paramilitary force that they often send in disguise amongst the protesters to infiltrate the protests. But don't forget that the Islamic Republic is a revolutionary state. It was born from revolution. Thus, it understands protests, and it's very, very good at trying to undermine, subvert, and shut them down.
All right, the brutal crackdown continues, so do the protests. How is this going to pan out is anybody's guess. But David, thank you for speaking to WION and sharing your perspective with us.